summer, Mr.
Thank you.
Secretary. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you as well.
Perhaps most importantly, happy birthday to the State Department today. I believe it is birthday, right?
233 years.
Where's the cake?
I don't know. I was expecting you to bring one out.
We'll come back to that. Thank you.
Two things, but they'll be real brief. One, when you talk about the substantial proposal, can you, I realize you won't get into the specific details of it, but does it involve a swap along the lines of what was done for Trevor?
Because I want to make sure that the proposal that we put forward has a good chance to advance. I'm just not going to get into it in public.
Secondly, for the last couple months, well, last 6 months now, you have been talking about how Russia is isolated internationally, and yet we see Foreign Minister Lavrov jetting off around Africa and the Middle East, and President Putin going to Iran, and say what you want about him having only going to Iran. They make the case that they're not isolated, and now you're about to have this conversation with him. So what does that say about the administration's efforts to isolate Russia when you are actually now reaching out to them to talk about the issues?
Matt, in terms of some of the travels that Foreign Minister, for example, is engaged in, what I see is a desperate game of defense to try somehow to justify to the world the actions that Russia has taken, both with its aggression in general against Ukraine, as well as more specifically its blockade of Ukrainian ports, and its denying to the world at a critical time the grain, the wheat, the food that it needs. So they're doing everything they can to somehow justify what they're doing at a time when we're hearing from virtually every corner of the world an insistence that Russia stop this blockade and allow the grain to leave. So no doubt Foreign Minister Lavrov will share some interesting views on the war, Russia's aggression, as well as on grain. For example, one of the things that Russia's been doing is blaming on sanctions the challenges of getting Russian grain out of Russia, when in fact, as everyone knows, and as we make clear repeatedly, the sanctions that we've imposed on Russia for its aggression against Ukraine from day one exempted wheat, exempted food products, exempted shipping and insurance necessary to move those out of Russia. So that's a fabrication. I'm sure it's one that'll be repeated, but it's one that we will continue to debunk. But what I see in what they're doing is, again, desperately trying to explain the fact that a food crisis that has gone from making 100 million people food insecure 3 years ago to about 160 million people food insecure during COVID to now well over 200 million because of Russia's blockade of Ukraine's ports. This is somehow trying to justify what's unjustifiable. The only way that Russia can fully address the concerns of the world, look, the ideal way would be for it to stop the war, end the aggression. But short of that, end the blockade, there's a deal on the table to do that. What's going to be much more important than what Foreign Minister Lavrov says on his travels is what Russia actually does in implementing the agreement. That's what the world is looking for.